Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Gitu-Ewart. It's Wednesday, September 21st. This is Africa 54.
U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken co-hosts a food security summit to tackle drought, rising global commodity prices, the COVID-19 pandemic, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine that has triggered famine in many countries. A leaked UN report says plummeting vaccination rates amid Ethiopia's Tigray conflict have caused a rise in deadly diseases among children. And in this week's tech segment, we introduce you to a nonpartisan organization in Nigeria that is fostering civic education by using simple technology to get ordinary people engaged with their elected officials.
We begin in New York, where U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is co-hosting a food security summit on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Top UN officials have warned that drought, rising global commodity prices, the impact of COVID-19 and Russia's invasion of Ukraine could trigger famine in many countries. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
The United Nations says more than 800 million people worldwide are suffering from hunger right now, an increase of more than 150 million since the COVID-19 pandemic began. On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said President Joe Biden would announce robust new assistance from the United States. Blinken said another way to support hunger relief was to push for an extension of the deal the UN brokered between Russia and Ukraine, which allows grain to be exported from Black Sea ports.
And as you've heard from my colleagues, despite some of the misinformation that continues to come from Moscow, that grain and other food products are getting where they need to go, to the countries most in need, predominantly in the global south. It's also helped lower food prices around the world.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has said the deal is not working, and he blames Western sanctions on Moscow for food and fertilizer shortages instead of his own invasion of Ukraine. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said Putin is trying to blackmail the world with food.
We're running out of time. If farmers don't get fertilizers at the right moment, poor or even lost harvest will continue to worsen the situation. We must arrive on time. And let me be clear, there is no peace with hunger, and we cannot combat hunger without peace.
Ukrainian Infrastructure Minister Alexander Kubrakov told VOA that Ukraine is resuming grain exports to Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and other African countries that need it the most.
For us, it's just to increase volumes of our export. Results of August were quite optimistic. We reached almost 5 million tons. It's very similar volumes which we had before the war.
Blinken said the U.S. is also looking to help boost agriculture in Africa in the long term.
Many of our African colleagues especially made clear that as much as they needed emergency relief, what they really needed was more investment in agricultural innovation, sustainability, self-sufficiency. I am convinced from the time that I've spent recently in a number of countries in Africa, the capacity is there, but it needs help.
Blinken visited South Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda last month. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
A short time ago, U.S. President Joe Biden addressed the UN General Assembly. He accused Russia of violating the core tenets of membership in the United Nations by invading Ukraine and said Moscow was making, quote, irresponsible threats to use nuclear weapons.
Russia has shamelessly violated the core tenets of the United Nations Charter. No more important than the clear prohibition against countries taking the territory of their neighbor by force.
Several leaders from Africa have addressed the United Nations General Assembly on a range of topics that include the effects of the global COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, peace and security. On Monday, Senegalese President Macky Sall, who is also the current chair of the African Union, reiterated the request for the African Union to be granted a seat within the G20. Sall said Africa is finally represented on the world stage because it has suffered enough from the burden of history. It does not want to be the focus of a new Cold War.
We therefore urge the Council to engage more with us in the fight against terrorism in Africa, and to do this with more appropriate mandates and more substantial resources. Furthermore, the African Union once again calls for the lifting of foreign sanctions against Zimbabwe. These harsh measures continue to fuel a sense of injustice against an entire people and to aggravate their suffering in these times of deep crisis.
Addressing the UNGA Wednesday, Democratic Republic of Congo President Felix Tshisekedi accused Rwanda of direct aggression. Tshisekedi said that Rwanda had provided massive support in war equipment and troops to the M23 rebel group, which has been increasingly active in the eastern border areas of his country, calling them a terrorist group.
Despite my goodwill and the orchestrated hand of the Congolese people for peace, some of our neighbors could not find nothing better to do than thanking us through aggression. Armed groups that are ravaging the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is the case currently of Rwanda. Mr. President, the involvement of Rwanda and its responsibility for the tragedy my country is experiencing and the tragedy of my compatriots living in the areas occupied by the Rwandan army and their allies from the M23 are no longer in any doubt.
Addressing the same gathering, Rwandan President Paul Kagame appeared to respond to Congolese President's remarks, saying, quote, recent setbacks in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo have served as a reminder that the security situation is no different than when UN peacekeepers were first deployed there 20 years ago, thus exposing neighboring countries like Rwanda to attacks that are completely preventable.
In the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, recent setbacks have served to highlight that the security situation is fundamentally no different than it was 20 years ago, when the largest and most expensive United Nations peacekeeping mission was first deployed. This has exposed neighboring states, notably Rwanda, to cross-border attacks that are entirely preventable. There is an urgent need to find the political will to finally address the root causes of instability in Eastern DRC. The blame game does not solve the problems.
For the latest on the 77th United Nations General Assembly, I'm joined live from New York by VOA UN correspondent Margaret Bashir. Margaret, good to see you today. And you know, the U.S. president traditionally addresses the United Nations General Assembly on the first day. That didn't happen, but he did address the UNGA today. What were the takeaway messages from his speech?
Yes, he was delayed by a day because of Queen Elizabeth's funeral, but he had a full house this morning in the General Assembly, and he reacted straight away to the news out of the Kremlin that President Putin is calling up 300,000 reserve military members for his war in Ukraine, and also his threat to use nuclear weapons. President Biden said that Putin made overt nuclear threats against Europe in what he said was reckless disregard for Russia's responsibilities under the nuclear non-proliferation regime. He said, Putin is also planning for referenda in occupied parts of Ukraine, and President Biden called those sham referenda to annex parts of Ukraine, and he said it's an extremely significant violation of the UN Charter. He said this war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple, he said, and Ukraine's right to exist as a people. The United States has supported Ukraine throughout the 7-month war, and he has said that the United States has given more than $25 billion so far in military, economic, and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, and that would continue. And he also welcomed the UN Turkish brokered grain deal to get the grain out of Ukraine, and he said it should be extended. And he was very clear in saying the United States wants to see this war end. He said, like you, the U.S. wants this war to end on just terms, on terms we all signed up for. And he said you can't seize another nation's territory by force, and the only country standing in the way of the end of the war is Russia.
Margaret, several African leaders have also addressed the UNGA beginning yesterday. They will be continuing, but we have shown a couple of, messages. We have Macky Sall, we just talked about him, Tshisekedi and Kagame. But what seems to be the underlying message for the continent from the African leaders?
Well, actually, President Buhari kicked off this morning's annual debate. He was the first speaker, and he said that the war in Ukraine is kind of preventing discussion of other issues, pushing other issues to the sidelines. And so this, things need to come back to normal so the world can deal with other pressing issues like famine, like climate change. You mentioned several of the ones. You played bites from the leaders who've spoken. Zambia is on the stage right now, and we're going to hear very soon from Kenya's new president, William Ruto. We're expecting to hear from Madagascar's president. Libya's presidential council leaders coming up today. There's actually more than a dozen, I counted, African leaders speaking today, most of them coming up yet still. Namibia, Ghana, Gabon, Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, South Africa, the list goes on. So we'll have more for you on that tomorrow.
Margaret, looking forward to that. Margaret Bashir is VOA UN correspondent. She was reporting live there for us from UN headquarters in New York. In the Horn of Africa, plummeting child vaccination rates amid the civil war centered on Ethiopia's Tigray are causing a rise in killer diseases such as measles, tetanus, and whooping cough, according to regional health officials. Deirdre McIntosh has more.
In Ethiopia's Tigray region, nearly 2 years of civil war have seen vaccination rates plummet. According to doctors and regional health officials, that is causing a rise in deadly diseases. The number of children protected against illnesses such as measles, tetanus, and whooping cough have fallen from over 90% in 2020 to below 10% this year, according to data from the Tigray Health Bureau. And that's undoing years of government efforts to boost immunization rates. In a letter this morning to the Global Vaccine Alliance, Gavi, the Health Bureau said the hopes of children in the region to grow healthier and happier were snatched away in the blink of an eye. The letter said there had been measles outbreaks in 10 of Tigray's 35 districts since the war began. It also reported 25 cases of neonatal tetanus this year compared to just 2 in each of the previous 3 years. The letter seen by Reuters blamed the decline in vaccinations on supply shortages caused by what is called a siege of Tigray by Ethiopian federal forces, power outages that have disrupted vaccine cold chains, and the inability of people in rural areas to reach health facilities. A ceasefire between March and late August between Tigrayan and the federal forces had allowed a trickle of medical aid into the region, but humanitarian access has been suspended since fighting resumed, a UN Commission of Human Rights experts said on Monday. In a report, the experts said they had reasonable grounds to believe that the denial of access to health care and other aid by federal authorities amounts to a crime against humanity. Spokespeople for Ethiopian government, military, and prime minister did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the UN report. Ethiopia's health minister, Leah Tadesse, said vaccines had been provided to Tigray this year and that more were ready to be delivered when the conditions allowed. She said in a statement that 860,000 measles shots were delivered in December last year and additional doses in April. Leah added that another planned delivery was on hold at the instruction of the UN's World Food Program, which coordinates humanitarian relief in Tigray.
And here are other stories you might have missed. Suspected Boko Haram jihadists have shot dead 11 farmers, 9 from Niger and 2 Nigerians, in southeastern Niger, according to a local official who spoke on Wednesday. The town is in the Difa region, close to the Lake Chad Basin, a strategic area where the borders of 4 countries converge: Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria. Meanwhile, Niger has received new military equipment from Washington worth $13 million to support its fight against jihadists plaguing the west and southeast of the country. Niger's defense ministry reported that on Wednesday. And in Tunisia, police questioned main opposition leader Ghannouchi for more than 12 hours overnight for terrorism accusations. Ghannouchi says these accusations are politically motivated. In our tech report, civic education is perhaps one of the essential tools that, if used correctly, can promote democracy and civic engagement between citizens, politicians, and governing institutions. For example, in Nigeria, Rural Pro, a non-partisan organization that focuses on fostering local governance rooted in citizens' participation, is using simple technology to simplify the way ordinary people engage their elected officials. For more, Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Ndiho spoke to Ojoluwa Ibiloye, the founder of Rural Pro, a non-partisan organization based in Abuja, Nigeria.
Ojoluwa Ibiloye, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Paul. I'm happy to speak to you.
The last time I met you, you were here as part of the Mandela Washington Fellowship. You had come to Washington, D.C. Let's start by you maybe sharing with us what your experience was like to be here in the United States.
It was a unique opportunity to join other young African leaders in the United States for a learning opportunity to improve our impact in Africa. I was able to connect with young leaders, young professionals, including leaders in the American government. A very unique experience that allowed me to share the work I am doing in Nigeria and also learn from other young leaders how they are leading change in their countries.
You are a driver of change. You've taken it upon yourself and a group of other young people who share the same ideas to engage people on a very important subject, civic education. How are you able to do that?
What we do at Rural Pro Nigeria is to connect citizens and elected officials together at the local level. Because over the years, the people have not been able to engage the process at the local level. We are engaging individuals and communities to come together through roundtable discussions to agree on their shared public values, the areas they want to see change, be it education, infrastructure, healthcare, inclusion. So they bring all of these together. Then we help them visualize this information and use it as the material to engage their elected officials.
Why do you think there is a disconnect between what politicians say or think and do and what ordinary people expect from these politicians?
Because over the years, the channel to interact between the governed and the government has not really been there. So the level of consultation has been very low. Like when politicians, when they are campaigning for elections, they go to rural communities, to reach areas to campaign. And if on election day, they get voting materials like ballot boxes down to those communities. But after the election, they don't see these politicians. They don't have the opportunity to participate until the next political cycle. When election is about to take place, then you see the politicians coming back to engage these people. If you can engage with them to get their support, to get their votes, why can't you engage with them while designing public policies?
You seem to suggest that that perhaps in the case of not all, but in some places in Nigeria, you have a government of some people, by some people, for a very few people, as opposed to a government by Abraham Lincoln, who once said, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, government is not only for experts or for elected officials. It is for everyone. So going by Abraham Lincoln's definition, democracy is for all. And to achieve democracy and to sustain democratic principles, we must ensure adequate participation of all. Every citizen should have the opportunity to talk to their representatives. Legislative debates should be influenced by the needs of the people. Democracy goes beyond casting your votes in support a candidate. It is a continuous process. After the elections, what next? Is to ensure that the people enjoy the dividends of democracy.
On that note, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Paul, for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much to VOA and to A54 for this unique opportunity.
That was Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Ndiho speaking with Ojoluwa Ibiloye, founder of RuralPro, a non-partisan organization based in Abuja, Nigeria. Earlier Wednesday, President Putin ordered a Russian mobilization to fight in Ukraine and made a thinly veiled threat to use nuclear weapons in what NATO called a reckless act of desperation in the face of a looming Russian defeat. For more on Russia's threats to escalate the war, Jeffrey Young, VOA's senior analyst, joins me live via Skype from Washington. Jeffrey, welcome back to Africa 54.
It's a pleasure.
Now, we've seen how Russia's invasion of Ukraine has impacted Africa and the global, countries in terms of shipments for grain, fuel, and others. What happens next? What are analysts telling you might happen if Putin makes good this threat?
This is the situation as it stands now. The Ukrainian forces under President Volodymyr Zelensky have made significant military advances. They have gone into territory that has been held since 2014 and more recently since February, held by the Russians or by Russian separatists. As a result, Russia is now trying to threaten the West, not only with a massive ramping up of its military activities, possibly a full declaration of war against Ukraine. And as of today, he's also threatening the use of nuclear weapons in Europe, something that we have not even heard or contemplated before.
Is there anything the global leaders can do at this point to stop him?
Russia is fueling its military operation on its oil sales. This is where the world has to make a difficult choice. The only way to stop Russia is to stop its financial capabilities. If the world stops buying Russian oil and Russian goods, that collapses the Russian economy, and Russia has no ability to do what it is doing and threatening to do. But at the same time, we also know the world wants oil, and there are countries that will choose energy over what is right and wrong. And this is what we have been seeing on an ongoing basis since February 24 and the invasion of Ukraine.
Right, Jeff, thank you so much. Jeffrey Young is VOA's senior analyst talking to us there from Washington. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
In many ways, I think, striking to hear the supreme leader, in really no uncertain terms, essentially endorsing President Putin's brutal invasion of Ukraine. And it was especially striking because Iran all this time had attempted to maintain a veil of neutrality. Iran has a choice. It can continue to opt for a position of relative dependency on a country like Russia, or it can choose the path of diplomacy.